Hey guys, this is Johnny Richardson here. Now, before I start the video, I would like to thank you all for 3 subscribers. This channel is really just for fun, and I would also like to thank you all for 159 views. Anyways, now today I'm going to tell you the history of all of the Nintendo consoles through the years. I'll be telling you some facts and everything else about each and every single Nintendo console throughout the years. So, without further ado, let's begin. Now, the first ever Nintendo console was made all the way back in 1977, and that is the Color TV game. The Color TV game is a series of 5 dedicated home consoles released only in Japan. Each of the consoles contain a small number of games and a built-in controller. In total, approximately 3 million units were sold. Surprisingly though, the only games that were available on the Color TV game was what many people consider to be the first video game ever, Pong. However, 12 years before Pong was invented, a game called Tennis for Two, which is essentially Pong, was created. The Pong on the Color TV game had 6 variants of Pong. They are tennis, hockey, and volleyball in singles or doubles mode. Sold approximately 1 million units, this was the most popular console in the series, selling just over 1 million units sold. In 1980, Nintendo's first handheld console, called the Game & Watch, which was the very first of them all, or should I say the first from Nintendo, was created. Now, the Game & Watch was a series of handheld electronic games made by Nintendo and was created by its game designer Gunpei Yokoi? I don't know how to pronounce that, but whatever. From 1980 to 1991. Most featured a single game that could be played on an LCD screen. In addition to a clock and an alarm, most titles had a Game A easy mode and a Game B hard mode button. Game B is usually a faster mode difficult version from Game A. Different models were manufactured with some consoles having 2 screens, the multi-screen series and a clamshell design. The Game & Watch made handhelds vastly popular. Many toy companies followed in the footsteps of Game & Watch, such as Tiger Electronics and their Star Wars-themed games. Each Game & Watch was only able to play 1 game due to the use of segmented LCD display being pre-printed with an overlay. The speed and responsiveness of the games was also limited by the time it took on LCD to change state. In 1983, Nintendo released the Family Computer, or for short, the Famicom system in Japan. This was Nintendo's first cartridge-based video game console. It sold over 61.91 million units worldwide. In 1985, Nintendo announced that they were going to sell their Famicom system internationally. This time it would have a very different design and a very different name, the Nintendo Entertainment System, or for short, NES. It was an 8-bit video game console available only in North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Oceania, Africa, and other parts of the world. The NES helped revitalize the video game industry following the video game crash of 1983 and set the standard for subsequent consoles in everything from game design to business practices. The NES was the first console for which the manufacturer openly courted third-party developers. In the same year when the NES was released, a game called Super Mario Bros. Was released and was made for this console. I doubt you've heard of it. But seriously, this was only the beginning, as more and more Mario games came out. In fact, many of you watching this video have at least played one Mario game. 1 year later, in 1986, both Metroid and Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels were released, And 1 year later after that, The Legend of Zelda was released. And much like Super Mario Bros., the game became so popular that it became a video game franchise. Anyways, a year later in 1988, 2 more Mario games, most namely Super Mario Bros. 2 and 3, were released and were also made for the NES. In 1989, the Game Boy was released. The Game Boy was the first handheld game console sold by Nintendo that featured interchangeable ROM cartridges for each game, unlike the Game & Watch, which had a different system for each game. Released in 1989 in Japan, it is one of the world's best-selling game consoles with over 100 million units sold worldwide. The Game Boy was the first console in the Game Boy family and sold in a number of different revisions and variations, including the streamlined Game Boy Pocket and Game Boy Light in Japan. In 1990, the Super Famicom system was released in Japan, and 1 year later it was released internationally under the name the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or SNES, or Super NES, or Super Nintendo. You know what? We're just gonna call it the SNES. Anyways, the SNES is a 16-bit video game console released by Nintendo in North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Africa, and other parts of the world. Nothing much to say about this console. In 1995, Nintendo released the Virtual Boy, or the VR32. It was the first portable game console capable of displaying true 3D graphics. Most video games are forced to use monocular cues to achieve the illusion of 3 dimensions on a 2-dimensional screen. However, it was a failure. And it was discontinued a few months later. Yeah, not even a year later. Like, seriously, that's a very, very, very short time. I know that's kind of sad, but that's okay, because 1 year later in 1996, the Nintendo 64 was released. It was Nintendo's third home video game console made for the international market. It was released with 3 launch games in Japan. They are Super Mario 64, Pilot Wing 64, and Syaku Habushagi. And the ones that were released in North America were Super Mario 64 and Pilot Wing 64, and the other games that were made for the Nintendo 64 include Donkey Kong 64, Diddy Kong Racing, Banjo-Kazooie, GoldenEye 007, Mario Kart 64, and Star Fox 64. It sold over 32.93 million systems, and it was considered to be the first video game console to feature 3D games. In 1998, the Game Boy Color was released in Japan, and in North America 1 month later. The Game Boy Color was a successor to the original Game Boy, and it featured a color screen and an 8-bit processor, and a custom Zilog Z80 central processing unit. It was made to compete with the Wonder Swan Color and the Neo Geo Pocket. Its best-selling game was the Pokemon Gold and Silver series. In 2001, the Game Boy Advance was released. The Game Boy Advance is the first major technological upgrade in the Game Boy line. Nintendo later released 2 revised models of the Game Boy Advance, the Game Boy Advance SP and the Game Boy Micro in 2003 and 2005, respectively. The Game Boy Advance SP features a smaller clamshell design and introduced a built-in screen, light, and rechargeable battery, which became standard features for future Nintendo handhelds. And the Game Boy Micro is an even smaller variant with interchangeable designer faceplates. Unlike the previous models, the Micro lacks Game Boy/Game Boy Color backwards compatibly and e-reader support. As of June 30th, 2010, the 3 Game Boy Advance models have sold over 81.51 million units worldwide. By the way, in the same year when the Game Boy Advance was released, the Nintendo GameCube was released. It was Nintendo's 6th generation video game console, which was the same type of generation as Sega's Dreamcast, Sony's PlayStation 2, and Microsoft's Xbox, and it sold over 21.74 million units, and is Nintendo's first game console to use optical discs instead of game cartridges. An agreement with the optical drive manufacturer Panasonic led to a DVD playing GameCube system named the Panasonic Q. The GameCube is home to several popular games such as Pikmin, Luigi's Mansion, Super Mario Sunshine, Super Smash Bros., The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, Metroid Prime, Pokemon Colosseum, and Star Fox Adventures. There was also the original Animal Crossing video game, although the former franchise had seen a Japan exclusive release on the N64. Anyways, in 2004, the Nintendo DS was released. It is a handheld game console developed and manufactured by Nintendo as the first system in the Nintendo DS family. It is visually distinguishable by its horizontal clamshell design. It has 2 displays, the lower of which itself is a touchscreen, in addition to the screen on the top. It sold over 154.98 million units, including 93.86 million. Nintendo's DS Lite and the Nintendo DSi consoles have sold over 41.33 million units. In 2006, the Wii was released. It is Nintendo's 7th generation home console. Nintendo designed the console to appeal towards a wider audience than those of its main competitors of the PS3 and the Xbox 360, including casual players and audiences that were already new to video games. These aims were emphasized by the console's distinguishing feature. Now, the Wii Remote is a motion controller that can detect motion and rotation in 3 dimensions using a mixture of internal sensors and infrared positioning. The controller includes an expansion port that can be used to connect other accessories, such as the nunchuck. The Wii was a major success for Nintendo. In fact, in 2016, the Wii had sold over 101.63 million consoles all around the world. Also, when you bought the controller, it comes with a game called Wii Sports, a collection of sports mini-games that were designed to leverage the Wii Remote. The game was bundled with the console outside of Japan and had a major cultural impact as the console's killer app among the mainstream audience. In 2011, the Nintendo 3DS was released. Although the name and look of the device are similar to that of the DS series, the handheld device is the successor to the DS and is a brand new console that contains 3 cameras, 2 on the outside for 3D photographs, and 1 internal, 1 above the top screen. It sold over 42.74 million units, including 15.21 million Nintendo 3DS XLs and 2.11 million Nintendo 2DS units worldwide. The Wii U was released in 2012 as a successor to the Wii, and is the first entry in the 8th generation of home video game consoles. The feature of the Wii U's distinguishing hardware is the gamepad, a tablet-like controller with a touchscreen on it. The gamepad's display can be used to provide alternative or complementary perspectives within a game, or as the main display of a television. And it is Nintendo's first console to have games with very good quality. In my opinion, it's a pretty cool controller, considering that the controller is also a touchscreen. The Wii U was met with low adoption, attributed by Nintendo executives with lack of third-party support, poor marketing of the system, which led to a lack of clarity of the Wii U gamepad from being a tablet device, as well as the subsequent release of the PS4 and Xbox One the following year, including its lower costs and notable early exclusives such as Super Mario 3D World. And finally, in 2017, the Nintendo Switch was released. and it is Nintendo's second entry in the 8th generation of home video game consoles. The system was codenamed NX prior to its official announcement. It is a hybrid device that can be used as a home console inserted to the Nintendo Switch dock attached to a television, stood up on the table with a kickstand, or as a tablet-like portable console. One thing that I have to put out about the Nintendo Switch is that it is kind of similar to the Wii U. However, unlike the Wii U, the Nintendo Switch is both a console and a handheld device. Like, you have two different Joy-Cons, and you slide them either in an empty game controller or the Nintendo Switch touchscreen, which is exactly why it's called the Nintendo Switch. I mean, it makes sense why it's called the Nintendo Switch, because what if it had a different name? Yeah, that wouldn't make any sense. Anyways, much like the GameCube, the Nintendo Switch has so many popular games like The Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Splatoon 2, and Super Mario Odyssey. The Nintendo Switch has currently sold over 103.54 million units as of February 3rd, 2022, outselling the Wii, Wii U, GameCube, Nintendo 64, SNES, NES, and 3DS within its first 5 years of launch, making it the best-selling home console from Nintendo and the third best-selling home console of all time. And that's it. I hope you liked the video, as it was really cool and a lot of fun to look into the Nintendo consoles over the years. Please be sure to leave a like and subscribe. This is going to help me and my channel. Oh, by the way, this is the first episode of a series that I'll be doing where I either talk about gaming consoles through the years, or take a look at operating systems through the years. It doesn't really matter, but you might like my upcoming videos, and yeah, that's it. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Thank you, bye.
Yeah.